The seventh day of the United States government shutdown dawned over Washington with a mixture of frustration and uncertainty. Streets around the Capitol were busy with commuters, but many federal buildings remained dark, their doors locked. Behind the closed doors of Congress, the blame game intensified. Republicans and Democrats accused one another of prolonging the crisis as hundreds of thousands of federal employees faced another day without pay. Ordinary Americans continued to bear the cost of political gridlock. At the heart of the standoff were competing narratives that went far beyond technical budget disputes. This was a political showdown over healthcare spending and fiscal priorities, laced with the influence of former President Donald Trump. Both parties presented themselves as the defenders of the public, while portraying the other side as reckless and indifferent to the suffering caused by the shutdown. Speaking to reporters inside the Capitol, the Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, expressed deep frustration with the lack of progress. With a somber tone, he said, "Well, sadly, that status has not changed. As you know, last night, the Senate Democrats, the same group, voted again to keep the government closed. So that was their fifth vote to shut the government down on the American people. It is regrettable and sad, and real pain is being felt by real people because of these political shenanigans." His words underscored the Republican argument that Democrats in the Senate were the ones standing in the way of reopening the government. Johnson cast the situation as not merely a political impasse, but a direct harm to citizens, to families missing paychecks, to businesses dependent on government contracts, and to communities losing access to services. Johnson went further, pointing to the arithmetic of the Senate as a key barrier. He explained, "It comes down to the necessity of 60 votes in the Senate. We only have 53 Republicans, and so we have to have a handful of Democrats who will wake up and do the right thing and stop inflicting pain on the American people so that they can score political points." By highlighting the need for bipartisan cooperation, Johnson sought to shift the spotlight away from internal divisions among Republicans and to portray Democrats as deliberately prolonging the shutdown for partisan advantage. His remarks reflected the broader Republican talking point that Democrats were prioritizing political optics over practical governance. But Democrats pushed back firmly. Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, took to the podium later in the day and offered a starkly different perspective. With deliberate emphasis, he declared, "This is day 7 of the Trump shutdown of the federal government, and Democrats in the House and Democrats in the Senate continue to hold the line on behalf of the American people. Why? Because we're fighting to protect their health care." In labeling it the Trump shutdown, Jeffries underscored the continued influence of the former president over Republican lawmakers. To Democrats, the deadlock was not just about budgetary numbers, but about a fight to preserve key healthcare provisions for working-class families. By framing the shutdown as a defense of ordinary Americans' access to health care, Jeffries aimed to rally public support and place the burden of responsibility squarely on the other side. He reinforced that message again when he said, "The government remains shut down right now because of the refusal and unwillingness by Donald Trump and Republicans to actually provide health care to working-class Americans."
And then I gave you an update on the current status. We did some questions. Well, sadly, that status has not changed. As you know, last night, the Senate Democrats, the same group, voted again to keep the government closed. So that was their 5th vote to shut the government down on the American people. It is regrettable and sad, and real pain is being felt by real people because of these political shenanigans. And it comes down to the necessity of 60 votes in the Senate. We only have 53 Republicans. And so we have to have a handful of Democrats who will wake up and do the right thing and stop inflicting pain on the American people so that they can score political points.
This framing set the stage for a broader national debate, whether the impasse was about fiscal discipline and governance, as Republicans claimed, or about fundamental rights to health care, as Democrats argued. For many Americans, however, the immediate concern was neither ideology nor political blame. It was the tangible effect of a shutdown entering its 2nd week. As the speeches played out on Capitol Hill, the streets of Washington provided a contrasting visual, one of quiet disruption. At the United States Postal Service headquarters, workers and passers-by walked past locked doors and quiet offices. Cyclists moved through the avenues near the Capitol Dome, but the bustle of normal business was subdued. Museums, parks and federal agencies that serve millions were closed or operating with skeleton staff. For thousands of government employees, the shutdown meant cancelled shifts, frozen paychecks, and growing anxiety about meeting basic household expenses. Contractors who depend on federal projects began reporting cash flow problems. Airlines warned that prolonged disruption to airport security staffing could delay travel. Food assistance programs sounded alarms over dwindling funds. These were not abstract political consequences. They were daily realities affecting working families, seniors, and even small-town businesses that rely on government contracts. The shutdown also began to test the patience of ordinary citizens who felt trapped in the crossfire of Washington's political brinkmanship. Conversations in coffee shops and commuter trains echoed with frustration at what many saw as needless partisanship. Public opinion polls showed declining confidence in Congress and widespread anger at both parties, though slightly more blame appeared to fall on Republicans, given the framing of the crisis as tied to former President Trump's influence. Historically, government shutdowns in the United States have been used as leverage in disputes over budgets, spending priorities, or contentious policy issues such as immigration and healthcare. The current standoff carried a familiar pattern, but was distinguished by the strong hand that Donald Trump still had in shaping Republican strategy. For many Democrats, standing firm on healthcare funding was as much a policy imperative as a political declaration heading into the next election cycle. Economic analysts warned that the longer the shutdown persisted, the greater the risk to the national economy. A halt in pay for hundreds of thousands of workers meant less consumer spending. Uncertainty in government operations spooked financial markets. Business leaders called on both parties to reach a compromise, warning that prolonged dysfunction would hurt productivity and slow growth. Behind closed doors, negotiators from both sides reportedly continued discussions, but neither seemed willing to make a significant concession. The White House issued statements urging Congress to act swiftly, warning that each day of delay increased both economic and social costs. Yet, as evening fell, there was little sign that an agreement was near. In the political calculus, each side was seeking to shape the narrative. Republicans framed the crisis as a fight for fiscal responsibility, accusing Democrats of intransigence and reckless spending. Democrats insisted it was a battle to protect health care for working Americans against what they described as Republican cuts and Trump's lingering influence. The stalemate, analysts observed, was as much about power and image as it was about policy.
This is day 7 of the Trump shutdown of the federal government. And Democrats in the House and Democrats in the Senate continue to hold the line on behalf of the American people. Why? Because we're fighting to protect their health care. And the government remains shut down right now because of the refusal and unwillingness by Donald Trump and Republicans to actually provide health care to working class Americans.
The longer the shutdown continued, the more it became a test of political will. Legislators on both sides faced pressure from constituents demanding a resolution. In some districts, local officials began voicing concern about the strain on essential services. Advocacy groups held small rallies outside Congress, urging leaders to put aside partisan fights and prioritize reopening the government. For workers on unpaid furlough, the mounting uncertainty translated into stress over rent, medical bills and groceries. Federal contractors, many of them small businesses, warned they might not recover lost income even after the government reopened. Food banks in several cities reported an uptick in demand as furloughed workers sought help. As night settled over Washington at the close of the 7th day, the Capitol remained lit, but not with the glow of compromise. Instead, it symbolized a government locked in stalemate. In speeches and interviews, Mike Johnson continued to argue that Senate Democrats bore responsibility for blocking progress. Hakeem Jeffries and his Democratic colleagues countered that Republicans under Trump's sway were using the livelihoods of ordinary Americans as bargaining chips. The stakes extended far beyond Washington. Around the country, families, workers and local governments waited anxiously for a resolution. The ongoing disruption underscored how fragile the functioning of the federal government can be when political divisions override common purpose. The shutdown of 2025 was shaping up not merely as another partisan skirmish, but as a vivid example of how deeply polarized American politics had become. For those affected, the fight in Washington was not an abstract clash of ideologies, but a matter of day-to-day survival. As the week ended, one thing remained clear. The shutdown would not end without political compromise, yet compromise seemed more elusive than ever. Both parties were entrenched, each determined to convince the public that the other bore the blame. Until one side blinked, the government remained partially paralysed and millions of Americans continued to pay the price for the stalemate. And so the seventh day of the shutdown concluded as it had begun, with leaders trading accusations and citizens waiting for relief. The lights of the Capitol glowed into the night, a beacon not of unity but of a continuing political struggle that left the country's most basic functions on hold.
Morning, everyone.
And then I gave you an update on the current status. We did some questions. Well, sadly, that status has not changed. As you know, last night, the Senate Democrats, the same group, voted again to keep the government closed. So that was their fifth vote to shut the government down on the American people. It is regrettable and sad, and real pain is being felt by real people because of these political shenanigans. And it comes down to the necessity of 60 votes in the Senate. We only have 53 Republicans, and so we have to have a handful of Democrats who will wake up and do the right thing and stop inflicting pain on the American people so that they can score political points.
This is day 7 of the Trump shutdown of the federal government. And Democrats in the House and Democrats in the Senate continue to hold the line on behalf of the American people. Why? Because we're fighting to protect their health care. And the government remains shut down right now because of the refusal and unwillingness by Donald Trump and Republicans to actually provide health care to working class Americans. That's